guys, this is Luke Sandoe, IFBB Pro from the UK with Redcon1. It's episode 2. Yeah, so in the last video, I kind of told a little bit of a lie. I told everyone that I was 4 weeks out. Turns out I was completely wrong, and I was 5 weeks out, so I've got an extra week. Now I'm 4 weeks out. So even though it's only been about 4 days, so that day after the hamstring session, I spoke to Chris, and I gave him the feedback, and he informed me that I was actually 5 weeks out, which is great. So I get an extra week. So today was chest. Again, like hamstrings, has been a massive focus for me for the off season, because in all fairness, in the past, my chest has sucked, and it's been a massive focus of mine to get it not only thicker, but to kind of get it to match my arms and shoulders. I've always had big triceps and shoulders, and so a lot of the pressing movements I've done have always been, all that strength and loading has just gone straight to my triceps. So I had to kind of fix the way I press a little bit. So rewind to the off season. The plan was basically to just perfect the form and the technique, because something wasn't right. I was strong, I was doing progressive overload. It worked for every other body part, but I still had a shit chest. So I kind of had to tweak a few things, bring the numbers down in terms of load, fix it, and build them right back up. So I actually surpassed my previous strength on every lift, and with better form. So as a result, I have a moderately thicker chest now. So hopefully in 5 weeks time, not 4, my chest will be less shit, which is great. So yeah, today we did pretty much lift for lift what I would normally do in the off season. My 2 main lifts, I always do a big heavy compound movement every session. And with chest, my 2 main lifts will either be very, very shallow or flat dumbbell press, or an incline barbell press. Today, obviously, we did some incline barbell press. So going over the session, we started with cable flies. Again, the reason being is I really struggle to feel my chest. It doesn't really activate as well as my other body parts. So we did about 4 or 5 sets there. I didn't go to all-out failure. It's mostly for recruitment purposes, to get everything firing, warmed up. I also have a very minor pec injury from a few years ago. I had a little tweak in my right pec tendon. Hasn't bothered me for a while, but it's better to be safe than sorry. So yeah, so we get a nice pump, activate the chest. So then we're going to move on to our primary compound movement, which obviously today was barbell. Everything was firing nicely, warmed up. So on the incline barbell, I was doing sets of 6, started with a plate and a half, all the way up to 4 plates, which in American is for 405 pounds. And in British, that's 180 kilos, which I think I got for 6 or 8 today, which is pretty good. And again, it was all of that load, well, the majority of that load was all on my chest. Yeah, so with incline barbell, just because you're squatting heavy or pressing heavy, it doesn't mean you're actually recruiting the muscle you want. Your body has a funny way of shifting load to where it wants it to make it more, well, just make it easier, essentially. So with the incline barbell, I actually did, when I was out in Florida with Redcon, I trained with Joe Bennett, the hypertrophy coach. And he kind of reinforced in my mind that a lot of the changes I'd made to the way I press actually was the right thing to do. And it pretty much just comes from pulling my scapula back, pulling my shoulder blades back, lifting up my chest, dropping my traps down, and preventing my shoulders from rounding forward and getting too much front delt. And everything's just starting to click with my chest. So everything, all the load and the feel, the tension is right where I want it. So to be incline pressing 4 plates and feeling that in your chest, that's going to make a massive difference. Whereas in the past, although I was lifting the same weight, I wasn't lifting it in the same way. So it's pretty important, anyone out there who wants to bring up a weak body part, you might be really strong. It just might not be right for you. Okay, so after we did 4 plates, I did a back off set, down to 3 plates, just went to failure. I think I made it 12, which is pretty good. I had a pretty massive pump at this point, which is cool. I actually I doubled up on the big noise and the total wall today because I'm a bit tired, which is a first, this prep. I mean, so far I've been pretty sprightly. You might actually be able to notice I'm probably talking really fast. because I've got like 2 scoops of total water in me. So yeah, and then after that we went to the incline hammer press. I'm not a big machine guy in terms of my loading movements, but this gym, Muscleworks in Orpington, which is near London, we're quite lucky that the incline hammer strength machine we have here is, I think, of one of the older models. And a lot of the older hammer strength machines, they're slightly different. It's a little bit wider, it's a little bit more comfortable. I mean, the newer one seems a bit more narrow and less robust. It's got a slightly different angle. So I can go up to 5 plates in there with no issues for like 8 to 10, and I feel it all in my chest. So again, it's about picking your poison. You've got to pick the movements that suit you. I'm not a big lover of machines. I'll use them because if they feel right, but I don't replace my heavy, like basic free weight movements for machines. I'll integrate them in, and that's another way for me to keep the load high and to keep that tension right where I want it. So we worked up to a max effort set, 5 plates aside. I think there were 8. I can't remember. Maybe 8, maybe more. But it was everything felt great there. And that was simply it there. We just set 6 to 8, all the way up to a max effort set. I took that to failure, and then we moved on. Third movement in was, again, something I'd been focusing a lot on this off season, which is the incline dumbbell fly. And again, I mean, you can't really contract a dumbbell fly too hard because at the top of the movement, there's really no tension there, but you can get a massive stretch. And I do believe in overloading the stretch on certain movements is a great way to sort of induce growth. So nice wide arch, big stretch, everything stretch out, slight pause there. And I normally bring the dumbbells up so they're just outside of shoulder level, to the point where the gravity is still pulling them away. Because if you bring them together, you could hold them there all day. If you bring them just outside of where your shoulders are, you can't hold it there because there's still tension on the muscle. It's a massive way to overload the stretch. Again, I wouldn't advise doing that early on in the session. I was warm, I'd already done 3 movements. So we did 3 or 4 sets there, not too heavy. Again, I'd already done all my loading movements. So it was just about emphasizing the stretch. I think it was just 3 or 4 sets, 8 to 12, nice and simple. And yeah, so then we moved on. And we moved on to a movement that, I can't remember actually where I got this from, but it's just a hammer strength dip machine, but with the wider grip facing the other way. So it kind of resembles a cross between a dip and a decline press, but it doesn't feel like either. And it's a weird one because I can't feel much of a contraction, but I do feel a ton of tension. But what I mean by that is, so when I'm at the top of the rep, the contracted position, I can't squeeze anything, but during the whole rep in its entirety, I'm feeling tension the whole way through. In parts of my pec where I don't tend to usually feel anything. And I think it's been a good way to thicken up certain areas of the chest, which I can't really do with other movements because I have this old pec injury. Decline presses, they just feel horrible. I'm pretty heavy, so doing dips doesn't really work for me. Again, because it's mostly tricep and shoulder, so this is a nice sort of middle ground. And we just did 3 or 4 sets again. So this is kind of where the volume was kind of get ramped up a little bit. 10 to 12, pushing as hard as we can. Nice and simple, but you guys should definitely try that movement out. It looks a bit foo-foo, but if you're like me and you need to focus on certain body parts and you need to think outside the box, it's a great movement. In fact, I'm a big advocate of the DC style training, which I used to do a lot earlier in my career. And one of the things that Dante Trudel used to always say is get weird with it. And I think what he meant by that is find movements that are a little bit weird and a little bit strange and non-conventional, but they work well for your physiology, which is that machine. I just fucking love it. It feels great. So give it a try. You won't be disappointed. And yeah, and then after that, we just finished with 3 to 4 sets on the machine fly. And this is a really nice sort of opposite to a dumbbell fly or the reverse dip, whatever you want to call it, because the focus on this machine is I can actually get my pecs as short as possible and there's still tension there. So I basically just batter them at the end. You can get a nice stretch, contraction, constant tension, and moderate load and blood flow. So it's a perfect way to get everything finished, capped off. Again, you don't have to go too heavy. I wouldn't say it's used for carving out the detail because you can't really do that. In fact, if you want to carve out the detail, that comes from diet and cardio. But I think you should definitely focus on every range of movement of every muscle group you're training. It doesn't have to be in the same exercises, but if you look at the way this session was done, every range of movement on my chest, every angle was taken advantage of, but I used different machines or different movements or different exercises. So from point A to point Z at the end, my whole chest was taken for its full range for every different angle, so I didn't really leave any stone unturned. But yes, it is nice that the pec fly. It's quite a classic old school movement. I think a lot of people don't really tend to do it properly because they kind of come out here and they finish here. And if you look at my upper arms, they're kind of not where they should be. What you should be focused on is getting your biceps as close together so you're like this. So if you can get there and get your pecs nice and short, really squeeze them, that's where you're going to get the best bang for your buck with that particular movement, because you can't do that with a dumbbell fly. So that's why I include both of them within the session, because they kind of go together like cheese and bread in a sandwich. So yeah, that was pretty much the entire session today. Everything went well. I didn't have any niggles, apart from my left elbow's giving me a little bit of shit, but it's not stopping me. It's just something I'm quite conscious of, but I always wear the elbow sleeves anyway when I train. I think every bodybuilder should wear elbow sleeves, any kind of support possible, as long as it's not aiding the lifts, but supporting your joints and it gives you that longevity. I don't think any like belts, wraps, straps, anything, if it's helping you, I think it's a very good idea, because a lot of people are quite anti like straps, say when they're deadlifting. But again, we're training muscle groups, not grip or strength, so it's important for that longevity, because I often see a lot of people quite meathead about it, and they tend to think, well, I don't want to wear the wrist wraps, I don't want to wear straps, and those guys typically have more injuries than the guys that do use them. And it's a good tool. If you want to be good at your craft, you need to maximize every tool at your disposal, and that's why I wear wraps and straps and everything, whether I need to or not, because I'm in this for the long haul, and the last thing I want is a tear or some chronic joint pain or injuries that could have been avoided just simply by putting a sleeve on. So it may not be cool, I don't care. My elbows feel good, my shoulders feel good, my knees feel good, and they probably shouldn't with a lot of the load that I use. But today everything went smoothly, everything was just precise, exactly what I wanted. I came in the gym, I had a plan, I executed it perfectly, and there's nothing really more to add. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you take something away, try some of the movements, let me know what you think, and stay tuned for part 3.